Hello, everyone. So thank you for taking the time to participating in SheShapes Consulting. So we are now going to have the third course, which is also, I think, the most unique one in our schedule this time, because in this session, we will not only discuss diverse career choices and explore common career paths in consulting, but also deep dive into our panelists' personal life stories to discover that what has shaped them into who they are today. So hopefully we will acquire more passion and courage from them to live our own fulfilling lives. So before we start, please allow me to walk you through today's schedule. So after the introduction of our panelists, we will have two main panel discussions focusing on diverse career choices and self-exploration, and followed it by a 5-minute break. And we will have our Q&A session where we will discuss some of the most frequently asked questions from SheShapes fellows, which were collected in the pre-courses questionnaire. If time permits, we will leave extra 5 to 10 minutes for SheShapes fellows to ask additional questions to our panelists. So let's get started. I think let's move on our first panel discussion. So for this part, we will talk about work experience and reasons behind career transitions. So the first question is actually for Xinyi, because you all choose consulting as your first job. So why did you join consulting? Can you share some memorable experience?
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think there were two reasons. One was the diversity of the projects that you get exposure to. And the second one is also in consulting, they give you a lot of responsibility right off the bat. And I did want to go into an industry that gives you that really fast-paced learning right at the beginning and gives you also just, yeah, we get to present to the CEO on our first projects, for example. And I think that is quite rare. So for me, I always knew I wanted to have a positive impact on the world, but I felt like I was so young. I didn't have any idea about how the world works even. And I felt like consulting was the easiest way to understand because you just get dropped into, you have to learn very fast. And with every project, you kind of have to become an expert into certain fields, and it can be completely random. And I thought that was very challenging and very interesting and perfect for someone who is well-rounded and also wants to develop those skills even further. And I do think there's so much transferable skills that you learn from consulting, whether you want to become the CEO of your startup or if you want to go into a full-time role with tech, there is a lot that you can take away from it as well. So I think it's a no-brainer for anyone to go into consulting for 2 or 3 years. You build a lot of expertise in communication, and building PowerPoint presentations is also very valuable skills wherever you are. And yeah, you get to learn how to interact with different managers, because with every project there's a different manager. And yeah, overall, I think it's a great industry for anyone.
Very comprehensive sharing. I hope our fellows can take notes of the sharing, because this is the question that you will definitely encounter when you have your consulting interview. Why consulting? You should not only respond to the upper side, but also show your thinking about the downside of consulting, like the crazy hours, something like that. So next question is for every panelist, like, what were the key factors behind your career transitions? And what are the main differences between your consulting and non-consulting career? Feel free to share your daily routine or workplace atmosphere. So Vanessa, can you share first? Because we are already interested that what motivated you to leave NASA and join consulting?
Yeah, for sure. I also just think that you all are asking really great questions. Like, I feel like this is getting to a lot of richness with our experiences as consultants, but also as people who are just moving through our careers. So when it comes to career transitions, I've made 3 now. And they're really important because I feel like transitions are different chances to explore and learn about yourself and kind of test a new idea of where you're going or what it is that's something that you think that you want to do, and just more avenues to build towards your future vision. So for me, out of undergrad, I started at NASA because that's what I studied. So I was actually very non into consulting, similar to Belinda, never thought I would do it. And actually was submitting my brother's resume for consulting my senior year of college to a McKinsey recruiter. And I was in biology and astrophysics and love the sciences. And he took a look at mine, and because he was like, oh, show me yours too, because I was just talking about myself. And I gave him my resume, and he was like, oh, you should really think about applying for consulting. And I was already a senior. I already knew that I was going to go research at NASA for a year. But I started talking to him about the opportunities. And when it came to just all the travel and all the different skills that the women in this group were talking about, it did actually sound like, wow, that is pretty cool, especially for some of the interests that I have that I can get into a little bit later. It seemed like a good few years to actually get to explore and build those. So I knew actually when I started my fellowship at NASA, it was like a year-long fellowship. You could go on later. I actually knew from that conversation I wanted to give consulting a try afterwards. So that was a bit of a plan always, but I went and worked in research and absolutely loved it. The reason that I transitioned was actually because I really enjoy projects where I can have a really big impact and work on multidisciplinary projects and just wear many hats. And when you're working in research like that, you're working with some of the most exciting and innovative and passionate people, but they focus on a very, very, very niche subject. So like my research mentor was focused on the tiniest protein of a meteor that was like from 4 billion years ago and like only focused on this like very one specific thing about it for 30 years. And that made him super excited every single day. And for me, I actually wanted to touch a lot of topics. I wanted to learn about the black holes too, and I wanted to learn about the expansion of the universe, and I wanted to do all these things. And I was seeing that as you get further in that career, you do specialize more. And so I wanted something a bit more broad. And then I also really wanted something with systemic impact. So I picked up a book actually called The Divide by Jason Hickel. It's like one of my favorite books. And it explores the kind of history of global economies and like capitalism from like 1400s to now. And it just really put into perspective for me how a lot of issues that I really care about, like racial equity and our environmental equity and degradation, are very much linked to our economic systems. And that's something that I'm just very, very passionate about. And I was like, how do I learn how like all of this big private sector is kind of influencing a lot of negative outcomes that I don't love in society that I really want to work on with no business experience. And so consulting is a great field for that because you can also come in from any background, and they'll train you up. It's a great structured learning environment and you get a lot of that skill. And I think one of my favorite things about consulting too is a lot of these firms that we come from, like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, also have a lot of pro bono arms and extracurriculars at work, which is really fun. So I was really heavily involved in our racial equity and social justice pillar, and building initiatives within our office, but also with our clients to think about how can we advance more equity and equality, and also worked on a lot of environmental projects as well. So that was really, really awesome and learned a ton in consulting. We can get into more of like the day-to-day as well. But I think as our panelists said, it's an incredible learning opportunity with super transferable skills. I think going in, it's good to know that it is really intense. Your hours are really long and it can be incredibly stressful. And you can have really tough supervisors and like the learning how to communicate with them and how to advocate for yourself and how to have mentors when there's challenging times are very, very valuable skills because it will happen to everyone, even your mentors. Like it happens to every single person in consulting. So I think going in with that point of view that it will be very time consuming and very challenging, but I think it's very worth it. And the people that I've met have just been next level and the skills I've learned have been incredible, but I knew that it was a shorter term investment for myself personally because it is such a demanding career track that I knew I didn't want to stay forever, but I wanted to stay that like 3 years to get a lot of really good skills. So that's what led me to transition to my next role, which I'll just briefly mention was at a social impact startup in Kenya. So I was working in regenerative agriculture. I was working in wealth creation for communities of color, which are really important to me. And I was our chief of staff, and consulting really helped me to step into kind of a senior leadership role very easily. So that was really, really great because the skills are incredibly transferable. And I just wanted to learn operations because as a consultant, I think one thing we don't particularly get is we get that C-suite point of view really well, but we don't actually get that experience operating in a business or leading a team. For example, I led like a big transformation of our finance function, or I'm just helping our sales teams on the ground, like actually do their work better. And so actually operating in a company was something that I wanted a little bit, especially in the social impact space. And so I got a lot of good experience with that. And so every move was kind of led by learning, actually. It was like, what skill do I want to learn next? And that's what's caused all of it.
Oh, that's really a good perspective to thinking about our career transition. So next, Xinyi, do you want to share next?
Yes, for me, I worked in banking in Hong Kong for 1 year. I worked for a very small consulting boutique firm as well. And I also worked for a tech company called G42 based in Abu Dhabi. So I do have some reference to compare the different industries. And for me, I found consulting the most enjoyable one, mostly due to the people, actually. I think the selection for a company like McKinsey, BCG, Bain is very strict, and they do filter out people that are very good at communicating, and they're very funny, and I had a lot of fun working on those projects. So I think also, but with that said, I agree with you, Vanessa, that it's very important to find mentors. And I always tell my friends, from the moment you enter the company, the first thing you do is find a mentor or a champion, someone that is fighting for you. And it is so important because unfortunately, most of my friends and myself, we've had some experiences where you don't agree with the manager, and it can reflect in your feedback, and that affects a lot of things on how you progress within your career in consulting. Your bonus, your promotions, the chances you get to work on projects like those, the nonprofits arms that one of the panelists was talking about. And in those moments, you kind of have to make your case. And it's so much better when you have someone in a company on your side, especially someone a bit more senior who's heard your side of the story. So at least they give you more of a benefit of the doubt. And you do realize that there is an office politics element that is also quite important, aside from just your hardcore consulting skills. And then one other main difference that I noticed was already mentioned, the exposure that you get to senior leadership within a company. So when I was working at G42, I didn't get to meet the CEO once. And when we were on a business trip in Serbia, they were having dinner with the prime minister. I tried to get into that dinner, did not work at all. But with BCG, it was the opposite. They actually want you to take more initiative, and even as a very junior person, they want you to be very bossy and correct people, even if they're very senior. And they have more respect for that, which was very surprising and counterintuitive to me, especially coming from actually a Chinese environment. I also worked in consulting in China for a bit, actually, at Accenture in Beijing. And that was also a bit more of an opposite culture, where you do what the manager tells you more so than in the West. And I actually do think that is a great skill to learn. It didn't come natural to me. But as Vanessa mentions, it makes it much easier for you to transition to a leadership role, because you build confidence in yourself in such a short period of time. And they do put you through a washing machine. It's not always very comfortable. It's hard because they push you so much. And every week there was a feedback session with my manager, which is also a big difference from the other industries I've been in. No one has time for feedback like that. But in consulting, it's built into the culture. And bi-weekly, at least, you need to have a feedback session with your manager. And he goes through every detail of what you did right, but also what you did wrong. And for me, as a perfectionist, it was very painful to keep hearing the things that I did wrong. And I didn't enjoy that, but I do know it helps you learn a lot. And in the end, I am very grateful for it.
Yeah, we all want steep learning curve when we were still at college, but it turns out that the steep learning curve is quite painful, right? We already shared lots about our reasons behind those career transitions. And our next question is actually a bit related to this one. So, like, you know that many our SheShapes fellows are seniors in college, approaching the transition from being a student to a professional. So, what advice do you have for them regarding choosing their first job out of college? Still consulting or something else?
Yes, I think if you already know what you're very, very passionate about, then you can go into that career path directly. But I do still think consulting is a great choice, especially if there's something that you're interested in that the particular region of the office that you're considering joining offers. For me, I was very interested in politics and economics. And that was one of the reasons why I moved to the Middle East, because it was all focused on public sector projects. And it did exactly deliver the experience that I was hoping to get. We really support the national leadership from every different angle on how to rule a country, basically, from labor, education, how to build cities from scratch. It was super, super interesting. And I think for me, it was one of the best decisions I made was going into consulting. But I think one of the pieces of advice I would give is it is quite difficult to get into one of these very competitive companies. There's a lot of investments that you have to put in terms of time, the preparation, networking, and it might not be as easy as you think. So I would advise you to take it very seriously if you already know this is what you want to do. So for probably in total, I prepared 100 case interviews. Each were 2 hours because you interview someone else and someone else interviews you and there's feedback. And I would write down every single mistake I made and just made sure that I did those interviews almost perfectly 10 times in a row. And I think a lot of people underestimate how hard it is, and you have to kind of keep reapplying. I didn't get into McKinsey in my final rounds because I made a mistake in one of the cases. So it is it is a lot of you have to get familiar with rejections. And also maybe I was really set on getting into McKinsey because I thought that was the best company. And in the end, I think honestly, the difference isn't as big as you would think. And I would say to let go a little bit as well. You're going to learn a lot from the consulting industry anyway. And I learned a lot from working at a boutique consulting company as well, but it's a different setting. It's not as organized. They don't have the resources. So yeah, and overall, it's just don't be too hard on yourself. Keep trying, work really hard, and yeah, that's my main advice.
Yeah, very sweet advice. So, Vanessa, can you share next?
Yeah. I really resonate with everything that's already been said, so I won't say it again, but just know I agree very heavily with what the other women have mentioned on this topic. I think other perspectives I can add are really, I think, actually that element of knowing yourself. I think I'll talk about this a little later when we do like self-exploration, but really, really try to do the reflection to see what is it that's important to you in your first job. Not what's important. I know it can be hard with societal influences, with what our parents want from us, with what our peers think is the cool and best thing to do. But it's your life and you have to live it and enjoy it to the fullest. So, like, what is it that you're wanting? So, I think advice for a first job is like, what is your goal? Is it to learn a new skill? Is it to dive into a subject area? Is it to have actually a bit more of balance? Maybe you've had a really stressful college career and you want a job that is more like regular hours, less intense, like things like that. Understanding what is actually your personal goal. I think also, you can't go wrong as well with just like doing something that will open more doors for you in the future. So the learning point again, like any career where you're really learning a lot, like consulting is one of those where the opportunities are just endless when you leave. So something that will still lead to something else if you ever want to change or transition, because that's so much more common in our society now that we will have multiple jobs and multiple careers. I think another big thing actually that I wish someone would have talked about to me when I was in college was uncertainty. Uncertainty is a big one. It doesn't have to do too much with, like, it does have to do a lot with this, but once you leave college, there's no more track for life anymore. Like, you're always in school, you're always with your peers, you're doing things together. And once you enter the adult world, there's no right path. Everyone you know starts doing something totally different from each other. And you're left with like a huge life that you fill and create yourself without these milestones like going to high school, going to university. Like, there's no more of that anymore. And so as you look at people in the world who are older than you or more senior than you, it might look like their paths like linked up together really well and they're so successful. There's a lot of moments, I can say probably for all of us, where we were incredibly uncertain if we were making the right decision or not, or if we were going to the right next step, or if we chose in the right job, the right thing. And so that can be a lot of pressure. But I just want to tell you that that's super normal and that will actually be the rest of your adult life. So trying to get really comfortable with the fact that you might not always be 100% sure of the decision you make, but it will lead you somewhere, and to trust yourself for actually choosing that path and seeing what it has for you to learn, because everything will always be a learning, whether it shifts you in a direction that you're liking or makes you pivot to something else. It will always be taking you somewhere. So just keeping the faith in times of uncertainty, I think is really, really important for like any job search, any transition, is one of probably my most treasured pieces of advice too.
Thanks, Vanessa's advice. I think all the things we can do is like hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, and try your best to enjoy yourself and your life. Because we will never know what will happen tomorrow, but we can all cherish what we have. Okay. So we have been talking a lot about the diverse career choices. Now we are going to focus more on the dark side of it, like the challenges and all the difficulties you encounter during the whole transition period. So during your career transition, what challenges has you faced? Like cultural differences, language barriers, or the changes in your job responsibility. How did you overcome all these challenges? So we still like Xingyi, can you share first?
Yes. So I transitioned from G42 to consulting, and that was a tech company. And the work-life balance was terrible as well. I worked every single weekend for 6 months, but at least I did get to sleep a bit more than consulting. In consulting, it was a bit different for me because on the weekends I would get those completely free, but during the week I work very hard until probably 1 a.m. 12 a.m. on average. So the hardest transition for me was just dealing with the lack of sleep. And I think when your health is a bit shaky, everything just goes downhill from there. And it does affect your mental health. And I think for me, that was the hardest thing, was learning how to set boundaries. I don't think I ever truly learned how to do that. I only started doing it after I know I'm leaving for an MBA. So I think once you're in that kind of culture where the whole team is working until very late, and there's almost no separation between your personal life and your work, it takes a very brave soul to step up and say, hey, I just want to close my laptop at a certain hour of the day. I think it's very hard to go against an entire industry, because it's not just BCG, it's almost every single company. And it depends on the region where you are, but the Middle East is infamous. And I think, in hindsight, I don't regret going through those 2 years of really, really rough, work-life balance. But I also feel like I did give up some of my health for, like it was a sacrifice to be made for sure. And so I'm now still kind of in a recovery mode, where I'm relaxing a bit more, sleeping a bit more, and it does change your entire mindset so much, because I think just don't get into that kind of tunnel vision where you have to be at the top performer of your country, of your company, because they do kind of almost try to brainwash you with that kind of culture where you keep having to be pushed into being a top performer, because every 6 months they put you on a matrix and you have to compare yourself to the rest of your cohort. So I actually think that's a bit of a toxic mentality, because once you leave the company, it really doesn't matter at all. And so don't get sucked into that kind of culture would be my advice.
Sure. And I know, Xingyi, you actually was the first non-Arab female employee at BCG Riyadh office. So how did you manage that? And what was it like being the most unique one in your workplace?
Yeah, I almost forgot about that. No, that was quite tough as well. Because mostly because there wasn't really anyone that came before me that I could ask advice to. Because I just the simple things like how should I dress? When I emailed this to HR, they told me, well, you're the first one, so we don't really know. So I still played it safe. I wore an abaya every day, and then that's like their Arabic traditional clothing. And I think that's also why I care so much about female mentorship, is because I want to help other people who also maybe don't have enough guidance. But in general, it's probably just being very open-minded and very open to making new friends, I guess. For example, when I first moved to the Middle East, I tried fasting during Ramadan, just to experience what it was like for my colleagues. And I think this is a bit of an exercise on empathy almost, because during my first Ramadan, I had noticed that my colleagues would get very cranky and moody, especially during a certain hour of the day. And when I went through that experience of fasting myself, I totally understand why they were so moody, because you start shaking, you get very cold, you get headaches from not eating the whole day. So I think just completely immerse yourself in the new environments and be very open-minded was my way of having the foreign environment accepts me as well.
Yeah, I can really resonate that. Thank you. So next, let's welcome Vanessa.
Yeah, I think, again, similar to Belinda, that transition into consulting was a really big one for me. So I was a science major. And so oh my gosh, it like turned to speaker view and I see my face so large, I'm gonna like switch that to gallery view. But I was a science major, and so I've never actually worked in business before, never took a business class in my life, and consulting firms are still meant to train you up. But it is still a really steep learning curve for someone whose brain just has never operated in that way. I think a big difference between the sciences is you're typically very, very certain of what you're saying at all times. And I would never say something unless it was like something I was very well researched in, very thorough about. And in consulting, there's this a whole new way of thinking where you get these very limited data points and you have to come up with your best hypothesis, or like what you feel like makes the most sense strategically with very limited data, which is a really beautiful skill to have, but a very difficult one to transition into if you haven't historically thought that way, especially if you're used to a more methodical and like deeply researched field. So I think that was a really big learning curve for me, was just getting some of those business backgrounds, like Belinda was saying, like writing an email, running a meeting, things like that, while you're also still trying to produce a lot of output. So it's like the learning and doing at the same time. So I think something I just cannot say enough is to actually the people that you work with, we've talked about this, but matters so, so much. And I think in any role in any company, you do have autonomy and voice with whoever it is that is putting you on teams, pairing you on projects to tell them something that I think is so important coming out of college is to be paired with a really good coach, like someone who is your supervisor, who is actually cares about coaching people and is good at coaching people, because sometimes you can work for people who are absolute stars, who are amazing at their work and their job, but they can't actually coach or train because that's a whole different skill set. And there are people like that who exist. And I think it's really hard to go through a transition when you're paired with someone who isn't able to kind of help you grow and succeed and support you. So I think a big thing is asking to be also paired with a supervisor or a team or a mentor who has that coaching mindset and who is very strong in that and has proven to be strong is something that I think is really important for those challenging times. I also think we've already talked about kind of developing mentors and advocates, and just like when you go into a new company, it can be intimidating. Some of them will pair you with some people who are more senior as mentors. If they don't, just look at people's profiles and take a moment to reach out to them about some common interests that you have together and just say, hey, I would really love to learn more from you or to learn about this thing. Because a lot of people are just innately very helpful. And so don't tell yourself no. Reach out to them and also just come prepared with questions that you want to learn about them, or when they're stepping into more of a mentor role for you, questions that you have where they can give you advice on your current project and your current work. So always come with something to talk about, and people will be able to develop that relationship with you, because we do really like to give advice and help each other and support each other intrinsically as human beings. So when you put someone in that position, you're much more likely to be find like a good mentorship kind of role with them versus just trying to chat with them. So coming with some of that specific input in mind. I think another big transition of mine was probably moving to Kenya and starting in my role there. The culture is very, very different. So at an early age, I was coming in as a senior leadership position. So a bit similar to consulting, where you're actually in your mid 20s leading teams of people who are 40 years old and above. But in consulting, where you have a team, so it's a bit more buffered because you have more senior people, more junior people, it was just me. So gaining that kind of that credibility and that respect with my teams was actually a big challenge, because I'm foreign, I'm also young. So I think a big thing there was actually just really, at the end of the day, we're still all people. So trying to create personal relationships with folks first, and then also showing that you're not there to take over some project or things like that. You're actually just adding and supporting. So whatever way you can help them. So always positioning yourself as a supporter or a champion or a helper of other teams was very helpful to me. And then just explaining how my skill set, exactly what it was, and exactly how I could help in their goals. And I think the last thing I'll say is communication is very, very key in your roles. So communicate how you're doing with supervisors. And when you're having a challenge and you don't know how to solve a problem, ask for help. Like that can be really hard, especially for someone like me who is very perfectionist, has prided themselves on doing a lot of things on their own and stuff like that. Ask for help, whether it's from your direct supervisor, or if you don't feel comfortable, one of your mentors or a peer. Peers can be incredibly, incredibly helpful in your roles. And just ask if they know anyone who's done something similar to you, if they've done something similar to you, and that network effect can really help you find someone who can support you. So through the challenges, like don't go at it alone. And that was a beautiful thing that I learned when I entered into my role at FarmWorks. As a chief of staff, I had learned in consulting how to kind of ask for help and use my network to help with things. So when I got a new project, for example, our finance team is failing, how can you set up a whole new accounting system and procedure for them and like train them on it? I didn't know anything about finance at all. And, but from consulting, I understood how to lay the groundwork to solve that problem for myself and how to narrow the world, because it was a very broad problem. And I knew to start reaching out to people right away, to start learning about the problems, to start learning about finance. So I knew how to break down that problem. But I asked for a bunch of help, and I met with a lot of finance leaders from different companies. I'd asked my CEO for people she might know. So really getting that help and support when you need it. You don't have to know it all and you don't have to do it alone, but you do have to know kind of how to take initiative to get the input that you need. So that helped in a lot of challenges too.
Hey, thanks, Vanessa, for your sharing. So I think career transition is indeed an exciting, also challenging process, but it also will be a part of learning. Like it pushes us to reach out and grow or even reshape us. So we have been talking for an hour now, and there's so much valuable and insightful stories. So I think we might need to take a break so far. And so we will have a 5 minutes break from now, and we will see you guys 5 minutes later.
I miss Long Beach and I miss Bay. I miss dancing with you the most of all. I miss the bar where the beach boys would go. Dennis's last stop before Kokomo. The nights were on fire, we couldn't get time. We didn't know that we had it all. Nobody wants you before the fall. Stop signing off. And I miss music. Me and my friends, we miss rock and roll. I want you to feel just like you did. When baby I was doing nothing the most of all. Contracts late, if this was it, I had a ball. It's not it's doing nothing the most of all. Oh, I just missed that fireball. LA's in flames, it's getting hot. My list is running long. Life on Mars ain't just a song. Oh, the life stream almost on.
Hi everyone, welcome back. So we are going to start our next session, and we will talk about some personal life stories and self-exploration experience. So let's. So the first question is also for each of our panelists. So outside of work, do you have any hobbies or side projects that are important to you? And how do they contribute to your personal growth and your career development? So, Xingyi, can you share first?
Yes. So I'm a part of the World Economic Forum's Global Shaper, and that was my main activity outside of work. And so I'll tell you a bit more about that later. But overall, consulting BCG has a great culture that really encourages you to do things that you're passionate about as well outside of work if you have time. They will give you the right resources. So I was on the social impacts committee, and I would organize events with the local orphanage in Riyadh. We'd buy the toys for the kids or take them to the zoo, etc. And BCG was super supportive. The first time I pitched this, they said there was no budget ceiling for this idea, so I can just spend as much money as I want on this. And I really do appreciate that kind of culture where they yeah, it's they're not concerned about you being distracted from work, etc. It's completely separate, and you actually get credits for that when in your bonus, etc. So I think that is a great element, and you also do get opportunity to work on nonprofit projects, but you'd have to apply for that separately. And then I'm also yeah, a part of the Global Shaper, and through that I actually came up with an idea to start a video series capturing the stories of women in Saudi Arabia. So I was very fortunate to meet super inspiring women in the country, because almost anything that woman does in this particular phase of the development of the country is going to be for the first time. So I met one of the first, the first female UN ambassador, one of the first mountaineers, the first founder of a dance school. And they all had very unique challenges, but they shared very similar stories. And even I shared very similar feelings when it comes to, entering an industry that is completely, you're the only person of in that industry who is suffering from the same issues. So all of us didn't really have a mentor or anyone that came before us to guide us. And that was the main intention of this video series, is capturing those also very vulnerable moments, just to show that we're all human, we all make mistakes, we sometimes even go through depression or tough periods in life, but it's still possible to be a leader, and you can be the first female CEO of the country. And yeah, I think that was one of the things I was most passionate about, and I'm still moving forward with these projects. We filmed the first 2 pilot episodes, but we're pitching for funding, and there's going to be a launch event soon. So I think this is something that it's very important to have something on a site that you're working on, because for me, my career didn't necessarily fulfill that kind of purpose as much. And this is also something that I'm trying to find after I leave consulting, is how to merge your career with your purpose in life. And so I'm very grateful that while I was working consulting, I still had this space to explore and do things that makes your hearts happy, I guess. Yeah.
So next, Vanessa, can you share next?
Yeah, I can share briefly because I feel like everything that was shared was like very spot on with just hobbies and passions and what they mean to your life. So I can just share a few of mine. But for me, I think very similarly, having something that like fuels and nourishes like your soul and your heart is very, very important as a person. And whether that's in your job or not, and something that was really big to me was trying to actually incorporate that with my work because I'm spending so many hours here and there's a lot of skills that I want to learn for things that I want to do at work. So how can I kind of bridge the two? So one big thing for me is I care a lot about like racial and environmental equity initiatives. So like I'm a Black woman, which means a lot of things in the US and in the world, but it also means there's a lot of inequity that you face. And so that's something that I really care about from my own personal experience growing up. And I really wanted to work on just issues of economic access, anything to do with education, especially when you're in these really powerful companies and positions that can have a lot of impact and influence. I really, really cared about for all underserved communities, how can we advance kind of messaging initiatives that can better support us, especially while we have the ear of really powerful people. So one of my biggest passions and projects at Bain, we have a racial equity and social justice practice for like all communities of color of different backgrounds, just like anyone who's not white, we're like working to support. And I did a really big project where we had this project called Brave Spaces on all of our teams. So on every single case team, we rolled out an initiative where you have an hour-long conversation guided by two facilitators about some topic of systemic inequity in the field you're working in. So if you're on an education case, if you're on a tech case, if you're on a finance case, we would talk about and share readings and learnings about specific topics of inequality in that sector. And then what could we do in our personal lives to make it better, but also brainstorm what we can do with our clients. And that was something that was super, super important to me because it's like a big just mission of mine in life is to increase equity. And so getting to do that for so many of my coworkers and getting some of them to join in as like facilitators too, to lead these initiatives and to train with us was really, really amazing. And it led to some awesome change with our clients too. So it's just trying, and this was actually started by us. I think a big thing at these consulting firms, but also just any job, is if you have a passion and you have something you really care about, you're more than welcome to like start it and lead it. So this was just something that a couple of us really wanted to do, and we built up, met with our office leadership, created these guides, and kind of just got it running. So if there's not a program existing, do take the initiative to kind of try to build something in your workplace too, if you really want to create it in that space. So that was something that was really, really wonderful that gave me a lot of joy at work as well. And I think, yeah, I have all like the very similar hobbies as everybody else. I love traveling. I love being outside. I love eating. I love my yoga practice and my spirit. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about like work-life balance. So I'll get into some of what that means to me, because I think it's actually the most important thing is like my spiritual health and well-being and actually taking care of my body and nervous system, which was something that I've learned from years of not doing that. So learning that now as like seniors in college, I think is so, so beautiful. So I'm excited to talk about that more. But yeah, just outside of work, how can you either combine passions of yours with your work because you're spending a lot of time there? And if that's not possible, because in some workplaces it's not, just building that time for your like personal life too is really important.
Sorry, I totally agree with everyone. It's really important to find your passion outside of work. It really helps us to maintain ourselves and be true and to find yourself in a very competitive environment. And our next question is, are there any specific experience or events that make you reevaluate your career and life? Since we already discussed lots about career, you can just focus on yourself, like your character, your values, like what kind of things like your past experience has reshaped you. a tough question, but quite interesting. So, Xingyi, do you want to share first?
This is a very tough question. I think probably most recently, not so much. My moments came quite early when I was 19. I was visiting a Tibetan temple with my mom on a trip, and I kind of had this spiritual experience, I think, when I just couldn't stop crying. And it really, in that moment, it felt like everything that was given to me, like all the privileges, that my health, brains, whatever, I have to put it to good use. And every decision I made since that moment was trying to cultivate or build myself up as a person and gain as much skills as I can to have a bigger impact on the world. So for me, I think that was a very pivotal moment. And since then, I didn't really have any pivots because I knew what I wanted to do, and I felt like consulting was the best way to gain those skills and to build that confidence and exposure to the senior people in this world. I felt like the higher you climb, the more impact you can have. And this does turn out to be very true, because actually in a Dutch environment, I faced quite a lot of criticism for this career choice. Everyone asked me, they kind of felt like I was a sellout, I guess. They felt like if you want to have a positive impact in the world, why don't you just join a nonprofit directly? And I had a very different gut intuition. I felt like at the beginning of your career, you have to learn as much as possible. And this turns out to be, for me, it was definitely the right choice. And I think if I were to join a nonprofit now, I have way more experience and way more to offer. And for me, this realization actually came through a TED Talk that Melinda Gates gave. And she talks about how there's so much to learn from the for-profit sector in terms of efficiency and just a way of thinking. And you can apply that for-profit mentality on nonprofits' purposes. And after so many years and struggling with the choices I made, I'm very happy that I did that. And it was definitely the right decision. So I recommend and I guess even if I went into the nonprofit sector directly, I still would have figured things out no matter what. So in the end, I think we just follow our gut intuition. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's quite touching. Vanessa, can you share next?
Yeah. So I cannot resonate with all of this more. A lot of similar experiences. I think a really foundational experience for me, similar to Belinda. I think I'd spent like 13 years of my life like working really hard from like high school to college to the start of my career, just being kind of a superwoman, holding it all, doing everything, whether it's like you're in high school and you're like a student athlete, you're on student council, you're taking all the hard classes, you're getting all the grades, and you go to college and you do the same thing. And like I was having the time of my life, but it's also really exhausting. So I've gone through a really deep burnout for sure. I think by the time that I left Bain, which was also a super intense career, and then was also doing a lot of kind of extracurricular and pro bono things in areas that I really cared about, it did lead to, and I knew this the whole time, that I was in like a season of kind of sacrificing my own personal well-being and health for these learnings or these goals that I was wanting to achieve. And I'm very grateful for the experience because it led me to a place where I was like, I can't do that anymore because it's no longer sustainable. And so actually in my yoga teacher training, which is about a year ago, is like the first time that I really, they're about a month long. And so I was in Bali for a month and just really focusing on my internal world and my nervous system. And I just saw kind of how much more I could be nourishing and supporting myself, and just how shot my own nervous system was. Like my stress response was really, really high at work all the time. So I have like adrenaline and cortisol and all these hormones just coursing through my body, which is not very healthy. And I just have broader thoughts as a society. I feel like it's very, very toxic for us, just our work culture in general. Even though there are these amazing learnings and great friendships and relationships that you get, I definitely went through a really big burnout that I'm even still, like similar to Janine before school, on the process of kind of recovering from. So I actually I left my last role at the end of last year, and I've actually not been working at all before school. And I've actually been doing a lot of personal healing and like reflection and meditation on myself and like going deeper with my yoga trainings. I worked on a farm in Hawaii for 2 months, which was really beautiful because I love connecting with land. And I think a big learning from that is that life has seasons. It has these seasons where you're pushing and you're learning really hard, but also as a human, you need seasons of like rest and care and time to do absolutely nothing. And so learning that, and so I've been on like opposite sides of the spectrum. And so now bringing it into balance is kind of my next mission, which I think business will be a big test for me of how well I do these. But it's like an evolution through life. But I think one of the most important things is I was just shown the importance of caring for my body and my inner world, because when you're in these fields, you do spend a lot of time not. And I think getting a practice at an early age of just really, really going deep with your inner self. So like sitting in meditation, doing whatever that looks like for you. So like meditation, yoga practice, journaling, something that brings you to your own spirit and soul, because it's really beautiful. Because as a human being, like your spirit is gorgeous and you are wonderful just for being here and alive on this planet. It doesn't matter anything to do with productivity, with work. It's like you're just like a tree. You are this living, breathing thing that is beautiful in and of itself. And so when you really not just know that, but feel that, and some of these practices help in the feeling of that, it helps us all look at life in a very different way, to where some of these things where people are stressed about this project or this promotion don't take the same toll, because you have that perspective, but then you also have that inner knowing of what is really aligned for you and you know what's important to you. And so just loving on yourself, I think, is very important in that way. So I think through the different elements of like burnout, working really hard, it's like led me to this place where I've really craved and been able to receive a lot of this healing and kind of nervous system support. And that's definitely changed my life for sure. And like one of my biggest things now is actually pivoting to how can I actually create like a business in the wellness space like this, where I can share more of this with more humans, because I feel like it just relates us back to our own soul and our own humanity very well. And it's our society right now isn't set up to kind of nourish us in these ways. So we have to figure out ways to give it to ourselves and find community around it. And there's lots of community if that's something that you're interested in. But that's something that's been very, very pivotal to me.
Yeah, thanks for what's that? Thanks for your sharing, and I think we can move to the next part, our Q&A sessions. We have selected some frequently asked questions from our fellows, and we already covered some in our formal discussion, and we only have a few left. And so this one is for Xingyi and Vanessa. So why did you choose to pursue an MBA? So, and what are your post-MBA plans?
Vanessa, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I can go first. It's actually dovetails into what I was just saying anyways. So I think two reasons for me in MBA programs. The first is that I historically actually didn't have that business background in school. So I was a science major. I never took a business class or anything like that. And consulting is a really great intro to business, but there's actually still a lot more deeper, like hard business skills that I want to learn. Because I really want to do something, as I was just saying, that's very entrepreneurial in the wellness space. So something to do with like mindfulness, yoga, wellness that we can like spread for ourselves. And I wanted to get a bit more of those hard business skills, but also be in a place that's very entrepreneurial. So the business school that I'm going to, the GSB, is like known for that. So I'm very excited for kind of that like entrepreneurship mentality in learning. And then another thing is just all the resources that school has. So if you're trying to pivot to a new sector in your career, or you're trying to launch a business, because like I'm trying to create something, it will provide me with just like the teachers, the resources when it comes to like mentors, teachers, funding, to actually be able to create that idea over the couple of years that you're in school with your peers and your classmates, and then build something afterwards. So for me, it's actually very important. I do appreciate structured learning a lot. So to have that environment where I can have this idea and test it through class, through conversations with peers, through professors, for things like that. So I think business school for me is really exciting and makes a lot of sense, from the perspective of trying to learn new skills, but also trying to like create an idea into some type of living business organism thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mention me if you want to answer too.
yes, I agree with Vanessa. For me, it's about merging my purpose with my career path. And I already mentioned, I think at the beginning of your career, it's about gaining skills. And at this point, I think I've done that. It's more about applying that to a purpose that I care about. And the entrepreneurial spirit at Stanford is very strong. And it kind of gave me, when I went to the AdMid weekend, it kind of made me feel like the sky's the limit. And any company that I want to set up to tackle a social issue, I can do that and I can raise the funding. And I think that is very important, is the resources that the school would be able to offer you. And it was actually already my plan. Even before I joined BCG, I always knew I was going to do an MBA, and that would be my transition out of consulting. So this is actually quite a standard path for people in consulting. There's typically also sponsorship, etc. So it fits very well within the path. So yeah, that was my reason.
Sure. And I also got a question from our fellow Yufei Tang. It's for Xingyi specifically. So we know that you are currently developing a mini series on women in Saudi Arabia. And what are the biggest common traits or characters you have found in these women that made them pioneering, especially within Saudi Arabia's relatively conservative culture?
Wow, that's such a great question. So I gave the name of the projects, and it's Saudi Wonder Women. So I think the commonality is bravery, I would say. They're almost super women, because it takes a lot of bravery to be the only woman in a room. It takes a lot of bravery to do something that has never been done before. And you have to just keep pushing against the structure that already exists for such a long time. And so, for example, even if it's about setting up a new dance school, there is no license for a female gym in Saudi at the time when she was trying to set it up. And she didn't even have a space to host it in. Or if you're trying to be a CEO and fundraise, there was less than 1% of the funding, VC funding, goes to female entrepreneurs. So they are actually much stronger than the men who have had, like, the whole infrastructure is working for them and not against them. So I would say that the commonality is not taking no for an answer. And even for me, being the first woman that moved to Saudi, you have to be a bit risk-seeking. And there are some studies that show that women in general tend to be a bit more risk-averse. And when we are applying for jobs, we need to have like 9 out of the 10 qualities that they list ticked off. Like, you need to speak French or whatever, be perfect. But for men, they apply when they have 4 or 5 out of the 10 skills. And I think I actually try to learn from that more male mentality, or being a bit overconfident. And I think you have to be very risk-seeking as well. That would be my main point. Yeah.
Yeah, Thanks for Xingyi's sharing. We have lots of fellows who want to talk with our panelists, but due to the time limits, I'm afraid we can only have one slot open. So, Yilin Xu, can you hear me?
Yes.
We're going to speak now.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for all of the panels sharing, especially on how we can develop the women mentorship and how we can embrace uncertainty in our early professional development. So just a small question for Xinyi, because I noticed that you have received a double promotion at BCG. So I'm curious, what do you think you have done well in your early career at consulting at an associate role and to drives you to be so exceptional? Yeah.
I because I knew I was applying for an MBA, I knew that my recommenders within the company need to give me a top rating in the letter. They typically they have to say you're in the top 1% or top 5%. And there's a very strict ranking within the company for each projects that you do. And I was very focused on getting the top ratings. But my lesson is actually, I don't think there's a one-to-one correlation between how much effort you put in and how well you perform and the rating that you get. There's definitely an element that you cannot control, whether you click with your manager or not, whether the projects just clicks with you or not. I think I can't really say why it was exceptional. It's more about, I think one of the main pieces of advice is you have to push a lot. And the people that push the hardest actually got the fast track promotions. And this is something that you just have to care a lot about. And so you have to keep asking your manager for more feedback and just be very clear with them and say, I need you to give me a top 10% rating. What do I need to do? What am I not doing? How do I meet that gap? So I actually pushed for more feedback session than what was required. And I think my manager did like the fact that I was that I cared so much and I was putting in so much effort. And that does help a lot. But also keep in mind, there's definitely, even if you try your hardest, I have plenty of friends that didn't get the promotion they wanted. And in general, consulting is already a very safe environment, and the promotion structure is very well thought out. It doesn't change very often. But when I was there, they added a new position called a senior associate between associate and consultants in the Middle East. And this delayed a lot of people's promotion cycle from 2 years to 5 years. And everyone was very, very angry about this. So there's definitely an element of uncertainty, and they could take it away from you. So that's also why I think it does, you do reap the rewards of pushing, even if they say, why are you pushing for a promotion? It's just go with the process. I don't trust the process as much as other people. So I think the more effort you put in and the more willingness you show, the better it is. And it's a lot of it is also about perception, I guess. So for me, even if my manager messaged me at 4 a.m., I would answer, I'd get up and start doing slides. I don't recommend this to everyone. For me, it did pay off because I got into the dream schools that I wanted to go into, and everything is right on track. But there's a lot of sacrifice to be made, and I'm not sure I would recommend that to everyone. So yeah, it's about weighing the benefits and the cons.
Yeah, thank you. That's really precious experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for Xingyi's sharing. And now let's move on. The next part, also our last session of tonight. So as you can see in our handouts, we will actually have an online group meditation. I have never tried meditating online with so many girls before, so I hope it will be fun. And I need everyone to put aside whatever you are doing, whether taking notes or reflecting on the panelists' insights. We will now starting a meditation section of about 3 minutes together. And please imagine your future self. And after the meditations, we will invite some people to share what you visioned, where you are, where you are doing, and how do you feel in 5 years. So first, please allow us some time to test the video. Xingyue, can you share your screen?
Sorry, I can
Welcome
see this.
to-
Oh,
Yeah, you can play the video.
Your 3-minute guided meditation for focusing on your future self. At this time, let's take a deep breath in. Deep breath in and release. Deep breath in and release. One more time. Deep breath in and release. And now at this time, let's begin to focus and visualize on our future self. And as you've gained that vision for your future self, let's seal in that image with a deep breath in. Deep breath in. Hold it. And release. This concludes your 3-minute guided meditation for focusing on your future self.
Wow.
You're a web designer? Here.
Wow, that's really short. I hope to do it 10 minutes, but we are run out of time. So has anyone want to share about that? Share what you envisioned? Like, if you want to share, you can just raise your hands. Oh, hey, okay, I saw a few fellows want to share. So Yufei, Tang, can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank you. Also, I think, so this is a 3 years invasion, and so after 3 years, I will be graduated from my master degree, and I envision myself to be in New York and in one of the MBB consulting firms and be financially independent, and can also do lots of traveling. It's a little bit shame to admit that I'm still sponsored by my parents and I really want to be financially independent. So yeah, I think that's I envision myself to be a very confident, independent, and helpful human being for the society. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. I believe you can do that. Okay.
Sure.
So, Wang Yongyuan, are you here?
Hi everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
I think when I imagined myself like a few years later, I don't know why, but I saw myself like after work in a random evening, and I feel like I really want to feel fulfilled, like in a busy way, but then I want to feel like exhausted, but in a very fulfilled and satisfied way. So I really want to be in a good place in life where I really enjoyed my work, and of course to make a positive impact that would make me happy and eventually enjoying my work, even though it might be exhausting or busy.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I hope you enjoy your work in future, okay? Next we have Dong Han.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I actually have experiences with meditation, and I have actually coded a meditation website before, so I feel like I'm cheating, but I was trying to think like what was the preferred state of mind that I would like to have in the future. So I was trying to think of a metaphor, and I think I saw like a blue and white lotus that is kind of like blooming and slowly fading away, but in a very beautiful way. So I think that's probably my metaphor for my future version of myself.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. So, Vanessa, and Xingyi, and Yiwei, and Belinda. So, anyone want to share your envision in 5 years? Oh, I see Xingyi raise your hands. Go on, Xingyi.
Yes, for me, I just wanted to share a story that came to mind when I was meditating. Because before I joined consulting, I watched this TED Talk of someone called Leila Hotates, and she was one of the first female consulting partners in the Middle East. And I worshipped her. And as soon as I joined BCG, I sent her a fan email because she works for BCG. And I asked for a meeting with her. And I was just so in awe. And it was like meeting a celebrity. And she told me, there's no need to put me on such a pedestal because you are already a younger version of the future self that you want to be. And there's no, you are already that person. So you're already on the exact right path. And that was also what I want to tell you guys is if any one of you struggles with being very hard on yourself, there's no reason to be, because if you look back on the 5-year-old self, would you be very hard and say that you are too immature or something? No, you wouldn't. So the 40-year-old version of you would look back on the current self and say, you're doing amazing. You're exactly on the right path. Don't criticize yourself for being inexperienced or whatever. You're experiencing this stage as you're moving forward in life. So that was one of the main messages that I wanted to give to you is you're already that person that you want to be, just younger.
Yeah, Rabbit. Thanks. So I guess that's all for today. So thank you so much for making your time to participate in our events tonight, and especially thanks all of our panelists for sharing your sincere and inspiring stories, your insights. I think all of us all learn a lot from you. Like, thank you so much.